continued?
What is happening at this very moment?
In Moscow, there has been an explosion, allegedly a staged one, at a business center where propaganda media outlets are located. Izvestia, Ren TV, Channel 5, and Zargrad.
Panic fire, total evacuation.
Why is this happening day after day?
To the exit!
There are terrorist attacks in Petersburg. Russians are throwing Molotov cocktails at collection points for humanitarian aid for war criminals.
Mom, look, we have a Trapava. Mommy, please come see. We have a Trapava right here. In
Saint Petersburg, Molotov cocktails are being used against sites connected to the war, and almost simultaneously there are fires. The expansionists themselves are carrying out acts of sabotage. So, after a Molotov cocktail hit a collection point for humanitarian aid for war criminals, the building is on fire. The foundation that supported Russian murderers and looters has been destroyed. At this moment, Moscow City is switching its employees to remote work. In the central VTB office, only security and a couple of duty staff remain. All this is happening against the backdrop of drone attacks and the threat of direct hits on the tower.
Guys, I was born under a lucky star.
Moscow City is under attack. An emergency evacuation of the business center is starting right now. Thousands of employees are leaving their workplaces. There's an explosion in Moscow. A fire is raging in the business center where propaganda media are located. Izvestia, Ren TV, Channel 5, Zargrad, Regnum. All the staff of the publication have been urgently evacuated. There is panic, fires, a total evacuation, black smoke, and an increased level of fire complexity. These are no longer isolated incidents. Several hotspots of tension are beginning to flare up inside Russia at once. Trump has authorized strikes on Moscow and Saint Petersburg. Both Moscow and the Moscow region are being attacked by Ukrainian drones. There was a boom, a bang. Fires are breaking out at Moscow's television centers. Russian propagandists are furious. Solovyov and Skabiva are under attack.
By the way, maybe, where did you fly to?
Well, something's burning over there.
That's kind of strange.
Donald Trump privately suggested to Zelensky to strike Moscow and St. Petersburg. The US president is convinced that only strikes on Russian cities will force the Kremlin to negotiate. At this very moment, Moscow City is switching its employees to remote work. Only security and a couple of duty staff remain in VTB's central office. All this is happening against the backdrop of new attacks, drones, and the threat of direct hits on the towers. And all this is a new phase of the war, and we see how Russia is truly afraid for the first time. What kind of signal did Trump send? What missiles could be supplied to Ukraine? JASSMs or Tomahawks? Why is Putin running, and why is Moscow trembling? We'll discuss all this with top analyst Alexander Demchenko right now. Friends, please like this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Sasha and I work twice a week on my YouTube channel. Sasha, well, the main question is, what happens now?
Strikes on Moscow. In the coming days, Moscow is preparing for a reason. Moscow City is being evacuated. Everyone is switching to remote work. It's not for nothing that even official Z bloggers, war correspondents, and even the authorities and military generals have started talking about the fact that, yes, there will be a combined missile and drone strike directly on Moscow. So they are preparing for a harsh retaliation. We discussed this retaliation ourselves literally this week, that in these very days there will be a tough response. I said before, wait 10 days, there will be a response. Well, here you go. I gave it 10 days. And as you can see, I was right. I assessed the situation a bit more accurately, perhaps, than even Donald Trump. That's just a joke, even. The point is, there will be a response, there will be a hard strike, and Moscow is preparing for it. Most likely, for the first time, Moscow will go up in flames. All those Patricks, all of Rubliovka will be burning. They don't feel the war over there. You see, a lot of people here ask me, especially representatives of the Russian political immigrant community, they often ask me this question. They say, Kyiv is being hit, but Kyiv keeps working, standing, living, and so on. I say yes. But Kyiv feels that the war has long since come to the Ukrainian capital. But Moscow doesn't feel it yet. It will feel it soon. 100%. Everyone will feel it. Dmitry Medvedev, who, after getting drunk, started saying that Trump is just decorative with his statements. The only one who's decorative is Dmitry Anatolyevich Medvedev. both in terms of height and intellectual abilities, and in how he managed to drink away his power in a single night and in his cowardice. Decorative. And especially in how, now sucking up to Putin, he's afraid he'll be taken out. A tweet here, a tweet there, you see? One moment he criticizes Trump, the next he praises him. Everything depends on Vladimir Putin's mood. A man who drank away his power in a single night and handed it over to Putin and Patrushev by the lake. Power lost in one night out of fear that he would be drowned. In just one night. And now he talks about being decorative. There is no one more decorative in the Russian power structure than Dmitry Medvedev. You can just remember this for the rest of your life. Just carve it somewhere for yourself. That's the first thing. Second, of course, the fact that they are now switching to remote work. Not just, you see, military enterprises, but Moscow City, that is an elite complex with office spaces where Viktor Yanukovych's son has offices, where Kurchenko has offices, where a huge number of Russian security officials, FSB officers, have offices, and where Bashar Assad and his family have apartments. This suggests that most likely they will shoot down drones, they want to shoot them down, and they don't care where they do it. It's obvious that their main objective is to prevent drones from hitting the Kremlin or any other important military targets, military facilities, like the General Staff building on Frunzenskaya near Arbat. In other words, what we have been discussing and predicting with you, Dasha, over the past weeks and months is starting to come true. Many people thought we were crazy, that we were making things up. No. Here you go. Now drones and missiles will be flying. It's not just Daria and I saying this about the situation. That's what they're saying over there in Russia. Gerasimov is saying it. The whole propaganda pack is proclaiming it. Absolutely everyone. Moscow will burn. What does Trump say? Why aren't you striking Moscow? You said it correctly in the preview. Why aren't you striking Moscow? There's no weaponry. Give us weapons. We'll strike well, but then don't just hit Moscow. Hit Saint Petersburg too. In other words, the Americans are raising the stakes. Putin went all in, and Trump thought, well, that's fine, but I've got more Trump cards. After all, my last name literally means Trump card. So let me play my own hand. And he did. Now he's already considering supplying Ukraine. Tomahawks. And that's the weapon that pierced 2 nuclear facilities in Iran. Tomahawks. 30 Tomahawks. There are no longer 2 nuclear plants in Iran. So why do we think there couldn't be several nuclear plants on Russian territory? After a Tomahawk strike? Now, Jassim, air-to-air missiles and ballistic missiles will be sent here to Ukraine. And we're saying that most likely Donald Trump gave a signal, quite a public one, without any ambiguity, showing everything, demonstrating it to Vladimir Putin. Catastrophic strikes on Moscow will follow. And now there will be combined strikes. Drones, missiles. They'll simply turn off the lights over Moscow. And they'll turn off the lights over Russia too. And the same will happen to Vladimir Putin's regime. The lights will go out there as well. The lights. It's long overdue. And if even Trump is asking, well, why aren't you striking? That means he's probably already come up with the idea in his head. A 100% idea. Why not do something to make things unpleasant for Vladimir Putin? I'm sure that's exactly what they're counting on. So I expect a major fire in the center of Moscow in the near future. Absolutely everything will burn. And this is already inevitable. They themselves invited this disaster into their own home when they started the war. They themselves invited this disaster into their home when they chose Vladimir Putin once again, when they helped him dismantle the constitution, when they helped him orchestrate Bucha, Hostomel, Irpin, Trostianets, Mariupol, and the rest of the list. They are the ones to blame for this. They brought this nightmare upon themselves. Now, it won't just be hellish sanctions, now it will be hell on earth. Trump promised hell on earth for Iran. But on earth, it turned out Vladimir Putin arrived.
Friends, write in the comments what you think about the potential transfer of Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine. That really would be a true game changer. Sasha, let me add a bit of a fly in the ointment to our barrel of honey. Many military analysts immediately wrote that Trump simply allowed Putin to seize the entire Donbas to continue his military actions, his offensive, aggressive, terrorist operation. And only after that would he introduce something. In other words, there were some kind of agreements between Trump and Putin. Go ahead and seize whatever you need, and then we'll impose sanctions. What do you say to that?
Dasha, you see, that's not how it works. If there had been a backroom deal between Trump and Putin, the NATO Secretary General wouldn't have been in Washington. There wouldn't have been any negotiations between the Europeans and Trump. None of that would have happened. And no one would have given anything to Ukraine. A backroom deal is arranged in a completely different way. First of all, the weapons shipment has to arrive. Let me remind you, Trump gave Iran 60 days. On the 61st day, the Israelis launched a strike. For that strike to happen, everything had to be in place. That included American carrier groups having to move in as well. American fighter jets had to move in, as well as American reconnaissance planes and American intelligence data. The intelligence services had to work and figure out who was where, how they were positioned, and in which bunker Ayatollah Khamenei was hiding. It's the same situation here. Stockpile weapons, accumulate systems, acquire anti-missile systems, and then carry out strikes, retaliatory strikes against. This is what Vladimir Putin will do. Yes, Putin will, of course, strike. It's clear that he will try to advance in the Donbas. These are obvious things even. But in 3.5 years of war, Putin has not been able to seize the Donbas. And by and large, since 2014, he hasn't been able to take the Donbas. That's the first point. The second, obviously, it's necessary to reach an agreement with India and China, because right now Trump is negotiating both with the Indians and with the Chinese. And these negotiations are about tariffs. And here, the issue is trade. Lavrov came to Beijing after visiting North Korea, as you know. Right now, Lavrov is in Beijing, and he is holding talks with Xi Jinping, and the Chinese side has said that it will support Russia even more. Well, fine. If they're going to give more support, they'll get sanctions. We're not talking about sanctions against Russia. We're talking about secondary sanctions. About sanctions against China, against India, against purchasing countries, against companies and legal entities that buy oil and gas from Russia. They buy nuclear fuel, they buy electricity, they buy coal, and so on down the list. That's what we're talking about. Secondary sanctions, strikes against countries, purchasing countries that allow the Russian oil fleet to sell everything under the sun, and to facilitate, to allow even shadow deals to be made directly and to let goods pass through this or that country. Turkey, for example, Azerbaijan, Central Asia, China as well, and so on down the list. That's what we're talking about. About some countries of the European community. That's what we're talking about. And which side do they officially ultimately take, so that everyone already understands the game? And thirdly, listen, in September, the official procedure for adopting the federal budget begins. We need to understand whether Vladimir Putin will make any moves or not. What appropriations, what funds to allocate, what to allocate them for, how much to allocate to Ukraine for specific countermeasures against Putin, and what Putin will do. It's necessary now to assess the behavior of the Kremlin dictator, the Russian troops, and so on. What will happen next? They will assess and they will strike. There is simply no other way out of this situation. Vladimir Putin himself overturned this board. I think he now deeply regrets it. He's biting his nails and elbows and everything else he can bite. But the problem is, Dasha, that he himself is to blame for this whole story. He overdid it. He ruined everything, as the New York Times rightly pointed out. Now, very difficult, catastrophic times await Putin. There's another reason as well, Dasha. Putin started purging his elite at the wrong time. He killed the Minister of Transport, Starovoyt. He went after the Kemezov clan, who until recently was his friend. He started cracking down once again on the Shoigu and Patrushev clans, and so on. He started going after them again. And these repressive measures are gaining more and more momentum. He started destroying his elite at the wrong time, because right now the elite should be united. And when half of the elite fears for their lives, when ministers, 9 people vote with their feet, vice premiers, ministers, top-level officials vote with their feet and come to the funeral to Starovoytovas, and Putin mocks them, sometimes saying a wreath was sent, then taking his words back, and they realize that, well, fine, now Lubyanka will come after their asses too. So we're talking about Trump applying pressure, an economic crisis in Russia, a total mess. And at the same time, possibly the beginning of some kind of coup. Because the oligarchs who bankroll these ministers, the officials, the military leadership, they all understand perfectly well that Putin started the first battle, that Putin struck the first blow against them. If they don't respond, they're finished. Now Trump will apply pressure, and they will too, and they'll destabilize the situation. I don't know, Dasha, whether we'll wake up tomorrow or the day after to the news that tanks have entered Moscow, surrounded the Kremlin, and Putin is gone. A coup in Russia, hooray? I don't know. But the fact is, they will act and watch to see how hard Trump goes after Putin, and they'll base their actions on that. That's a fact. This is probably one of the most turbulent periods of this war, given the tension of this conflict. It won't be easy. It will be turbulent. At times it will be tough. But for Putin, in the end, it will end badly. These are fateful days for the war, for Ukraine, yes. But these are dark and grim days for Vladimir Putin. Trump has no other choice. To use Margarita Simonian's words, he simply can't back down. He just can't anymore. And Putin will choke on him. And this is Vladimir Putin's fault. He himself is to blame for what happened.
Sasha, Tomahawk missiles, are they really something we could see in the coming months, or is that still unrealistic for now?
This is Trump raising the stakes. This is blackmail against Putin. Trump has shown him several times what the Tomahawk system is, what Tomahawk missiles are. He demonstrated it once in Syria, when he destroyed, just completely wrecked, the Syrian bases where Russian military and Russian aircraft were stationed. He showed what American weapons are capable of, using the example of the Wagner mercenaries, whom he also wiped out. He demonstrated what Tomahawks are, using Iran as an example. And now he says, that's it, I'll send Tomahawks to both Zelensky and Ukraine. Hundreds of them, take your pick. In other words, he's raising the stakes, but he doesn't want the war to turn into a global, large-scale conflict. He doesn't want to fight Putin directly, but he probably has to do it, or will have to do it. But for now, he's just raising the stakes to the max, to the limit. Trump has a higher ceiling of possibilities. He has more room to maneuver, you see? He's showing Putin, I can even provide Tomahawks. And you don't have any. You have nothing to counter these Tomahawks with. The Patriots are mine. Those are my Patriots. I have the best anti-missiles. And you don't have them. If there has already been a strike on Siberia and Siberia was burning, I don't know, for the second or third time, even just in the last month, you see, before, the territory of Russia was an asset, a vast territory. Good luck making it all the way through. You'd get to the Urals and then wander off. Somewhere around there, you'd just give up and turn back home. Now, Russia's vast territory is a disadvantage. It's a negative factor because it's impossible to cover it with anti-drone systems, with anti-missile systems. Do you understand? It's impossible. So once again, they'll just protect Putin somewhere near the Kremlin. But all of Moscow will be burning. They'll protect Saint Petersburg, but Siberia will be burning. You understand? So Tomahawks are a realistic prospect for the future. And when Putin says no to everything, and most likely he will say no, he simply has no other option left to show, no weakness. He can't show his security forces on whom he depends and on whom all his power is based that, guys, I chickened out, I can't do it. He will go all the way. He will keep making mistake after mistake. But Trump will keep putting on more and more pressure, together with the Europeans and everyone else. Eventually, we will reach a situation where China will have to get directly and openly involved. Directly and openly involved. And we are already approaching that situation.
Everyone has already written that Sevastopol is starting to heat up. Russia's public pages in occupied Crimea, they write that Trump might strike Sevastopol with JASSM missiles, which have replaced Tomahawks. They write that, according to the latest comments, Trump is also considering supplying Ukraine with Tomahawk missiles, which could hit Moscow and Saint Petersburg. Panic is starting in Crimea. The propagandists are already howling. So this is it. This is the zone of tension that is now rapidly developing in Russian military public pages. Tell me, and
notice, Trump hasn't supplied anything yet. You see, that's a skill in itself. He hasn't done anything yet, and the Moscow exchange is already starting to fall. He hasn't done anything yet, and the public pages are already howling. He hasn't done anything yet, and already half of Moscow is being evacuated in Russia. He hasn't done anything yet, and already problems are starting in Crimea, and there aren't even any Tomahawks there yet. And now, attention friends, imagine the situation. There are Tomahawks, and Tomahawks are being launched. Just multiply all this hysteria by 10 or even 100. Multiply it, they'll go insane. They're not even there yet, and they're already starting to talk about how it's all just for show. But when they are there, I don't know, they'll just all disappear. As soon as the Tomahawks start flying toward Moscow, the first person who won't be in Moscow is Dmitry Anatolyevich Medvedev. He'll fly away. And that's already happened before. Are you even laughing? But that's how it was. When Prigozhin was marching on Moscow through the Rostov region, who was the first to run away? Everyone else stayed. No one understood anything. Everyone stayed in their places. Everyone was afraid. Who ran away? Putin and Medvedev. Putin and Medvedev. Putin took Medvedev by the hand because it's written in the constitution that if anything happens, Medvedev also gets a lifetime term, that he is untouchable. Medvedev, the only president who is untouchable besides Putin, is Medvedev. He took Medvedev by the hand like a bride and flew off with him in an unknown direction to some kind of bunker. And this time, as soon as tomahawks or something else start flying toward Moscow or anywhere else, Medvedev will immediately disappear. He'll be gone right away because everything about him is just for show. Dmitry Medvedev.
Sasha, did you notice how, excuse me, he trolled and mocked very harshly, I must say, how the NATO Secretary General made fun of Medinsky during the negotiation process?
When
They were discussing things with Trump. So Trump was trying to explain that, you see, I call Putin and Putin says everything is fine. But then my wife Melania tells me they're bombing Kiev. What's so fine about that? And I believed him, but then the NATO Secretary General Rutte tells him otherwise. So how can you believe them if they send Medinsky to go there and spout nonsense? Historical, pseudo-historical nonsense about Russia?
No, what they said was that Putin sent some crazy historian who talked about the history of Russia starting from the year 1245. So obviously Trump was once told about Medinsky and then he forgot about him. Medinsky is not the kind of person you need to remember, honestly. And Medinsky's books are not the kind of books you need to keep rereading. But it's just that, once again, Trump was shown that Putin sends some strange people to negotiations and doesn't take the talk seriously. Seriously. What does this mean? It means that sooner or later, if Putin is told directly, look, if you go to negotiations, no more Medinskys, now only the key figures, the people who make decisions, and you personally, no one else. I won't accept anything else. There is no room for maneuver anymore, Dasha. You can't send Medinsky, you can't send some random person, someone from some unclear department. You can't send just any advisor of yours. Only top-level representatives. And only you personally. Where in the end, your signature is on it, a peace agreement and so on. Because Putin was basically given an ultimatum. Either a peace agreement with Zelensky within 50 days, or I'll tear you and your regime to pieces. That's all that was conveyed to him. As for Melania Trump, it's necessary to urgently check if she has any Ukrainian roots. I think that this is the person who is sitting. I can just picture this scene. I don't know. I can really picture this scene. Trump comes home tired after work. There he saw football for the first time. He visited a stadium somewhere. He cut some ribbon. I don't know. He drank some Coca-Cola, pressed the red button, and they brought him a Coke. The man is tired. He comes home, goes up to the second floor of the White House, comes into the house, and Melania says, I had a wonderful conversation with Vladimir, with Putin. She says, can you imagine, Donald? They struck Kiev, they struck Lutsk. So I think we finally found the person who knows the geography of Ukraine very well. Sasha?
If I'm not mistaken, Melania Trump is her closest friend. Sasha Nikolenko, the former Miss Ukraine Universe, who, as it turns out...
Was it the inauguration?
Yes, and they even lived in the same room during the competition. And if I'm not mistaken, it was Melania Trump who introduced Alexandra Nikolenko, the Ukrainian, Miss Ukraine, with her future husband, who later became her husband and business partner, Donald Trump. As I understand it, if Melania Trump has any affection for Ukraine, it's specifically because of Sasha Nikolenko, since they are friends. And since Melania is European, in principle, she should know European geography because she's not American. This is about how Trump fights against migrants, even though his wife is not American and was born in Europe.
Well, you see, for example, I personally wouldn't draw that connection with Sasha Nikolenko. But if that's the case, then I want to say that Melania Trump and Trump, in principle, have a daily overview of the situation in Ukraine. And that's a good thing. If he has already said this directly, Dasha, it means that this information is reaching him. And that's also good. That's good, really.
Of course, we still need to discuss Putin's actions with you. After all of this, you have absolutely conveyed the meaning of Dmitry Medvedev's post, which ends with, the world's shadowed expert in the consequences of the belligerent Europe was disappointed. Russia didn't care. In other words, Russia doesn't care. That's what Medvedev stated. But here's the question. What will Putin do if Medvedev declares that Russia didn't care? Meaning it doesn't care about all these words from Trump and all his threats.
Putin does care. Putin will now try in these last 50 days to restore contact with Trump. But at the same time, he will strike at Ukraine. These are two things that at first glance seem completely unrelated, but that's how it will be. In the end, nothing will work out for him. Listen, Trump negotiated with the Iranians 60 days. He negotiated with the Iranians 60 days. He talked to them, his representatives met with them. In the media, everyone was told that he was putting pressure on Netanyahu. But in the end, it turned out that Mossad carried out 3 brilliant special military operations, together with Israeli military intelligence Aman. Then it turned out that Trump gathered troops and struck Iran. Putin can do whatever he wants to do, but weapons went to Ukraine, and missiles will go to Russia. To Moscow first and foremost. What is Vladimir Putin doing today? Now, that's interesting. We're missing this. So what is Vladimir Putin doing today? Russia launches a drone that first flies into Ukrainian territory, then turns toward Belarusian territory. It flies over Belarus, then returns from Belarusian territory, supposedly as if a Belarusian drone is flying into Ukraine to strike Chernihiv or Kyiv from the north. In other words, it's obvious that Vladimir Putin wanted to provoke this situation and do everything to pull Lukashenko away from the Americans, from Trump, to break that connection. What does Lukashenko do? Attention, Lukashenko suddenly scrambles a helicopter and destroys the drone at the border, the Belarusian-Ukrainian border. What does this tell us? This shows that Vladimir Putin still wants to entangle Lukashenko in this war, to do everything to neutralize Lukashenko, to gain control over Belarus and send his army through Belarusian territory, to use Belarus as a staging ground, either against all of NATO in the east, or rather in the west, or directly for Putin, or directly against Ukraine from the north. But Dasha, we're talking about the fact that Vladimir Putin understands perfectly well that Lukashenko is backing out, that Lukashenko is trying to distance himself, that Lukashenko doesn't want to be tied together. Now, with Putin, Lukashenko has started actively flirting with Trump, and Lukashenko has been promised something, and it's something very tempting. And Lukashenko doesn't want to lose sight of that tempting offer. He doesn't want to. But Putin really wants Lukashenko to break away from Trump. Did you notice? Here is one of the most important pieces of news that came from Trump, apart from the Ukrainian topic, during his speech in the Oval Office with Mark Rutte and the NATO Secretary General. It was stated as follows, that the United States is directly influencing and was the party that reconciled, that began the process of reconciliation and drafting a peace treaty between Armenia and Azerbaijan. In other words, it's Trump who is taking the Caucasus away from Putin. America is taking the Caucasus away from Putin. We were wondering why all of this is happening. Trump, that's why all of this is happening. So attention, Dash. Finland, Sweden, NATO bases, Saint Petersburg is surrounded. Troops are practically at the doorstep. NATO troops near Saint Petersburg. Soon there will be a border breakthrough. At the same time, British and French troops will be in Ukraine, and also troops from 28 other NATO member countries. After the end, or rather after the start of the ceasefire, the period of silence. Attention, there will be a Turkish NATO base in Azerbaijan. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Russian base in Gyumri, Armenia disappears. If Armenia closes all Russian bases on its territory, what do I think? I think that Vladimir Putin, who has clearly realized that he won't be able to take Ukraine no matter how hard he tries, now wants to prolong the war. But it's one thing when you are playing to exhaust Ukraine's supplies and resources, and quite another when you're playing to exhaust America's supplies and resources. They are not comparable. You have far fewer resources. You will lose this war. If Trump gets involved, and he has gotten involved, so he will be looking for other opportunities for himself. I think we need to consider two options, or rather three options. The first option is a full-scale attempt to occupy Belarus and to destroy the Lukashenko regime and Lukashenko himself. The second is a direct attempt at sabotage. The first is Armenia, and possibly even an attempt to occupy Armenia. And the third scenario is the start of a military campaign against Georgia. I think in the near future we may witness these scenarios unfold. Putin will choose one of these scenarios for himself because the population, the plebs, need something to be shown on television. Now, this is what they'll be showing. This right here. Sasha, a quick side note. There's a whole article out about Melania Trump. As they say, we're at the forefront. The Times published a big article. Zelensky has gained an unexpected ally in the White House, Melania Trump. According to the publication, she actively reminds Trump about the victims of Russian strikes. In February 2022, she publicly called the killing of peaceful Ukrainians horrible, tragic murders of innocent people. While Trump called Putin smart and brilliant, Melania called him a fiend. She constantly appealed to her followers to help Ukraine. She has much more political influence over her husband than was previously thought. I note that, despite having numerous advisors on security and foreign policy, her voice can be decisive. Trump listens to certain people, especially those who are close to him, even more so if their last name is Trump. Sasha, what do you think? I would say that we have gained an unexpected ally. No one expected this. We have gained an unexpected ally, and honestly, that's actually good news, even joyful. You know, all of this is actually very pleasant because for a long time, Ukraine was searching for ways and approaches, how to convince Trump. And it turned out There was really no need to search that hard. It turned out that there is the First Lady who can, bypassing everyone else, come directly and say, Donald, it's time to be done with Volodya Putin. End things with him. I don't like him. And as it turns out, for Trump, that's enough. That's much more than all the negotiations with Putin, more than the persuasion from the Senate, Congress, and so on. More than Elon Musk, who's half crazy. It turned out that Melania and Trump are quite enough. That's very good news for Ukraine, really. I don't know what will happen next. I don't know what level of influence there will be, how she will continue to support or not support Ukraine. But what we have today, if thanks to Melania and Trump, Ukraine receives deadly missiles, full protection of its skies, 17 Patriots, and even Tomahawk missiles, then she deserves a monument in the center of Kyiv and a street named after Melania and Trump.
Yes, you're right, Sasha. And most importantly, you always say, what? Putin did certain things with his underwear and slapped Trump across the face. And The Atlantic completely agrees with you, because The Atlantic also wrote about her, yes, The Atlantic, about the reasons for the increased US aid to Ukraine. Putin humiliated Trump officially, just humiliated Trump officially, and Trump can't get over it. Here you go, public humiliation.
I think, by the way, Trump even told Melania about it. Like, listen, he's just humiliating you, and that's where it all ended, you know? And then things just kept moving on. So here we are talking and talking, and I ask you, what kind of movement started? They wanted action. They can't live without action. Well, here you go. You get your action, our
Not
moving.
Look, the news is coming in while we're streaming with you. We're writing this stream. Germany might buy a Typhoon launcher from the US to launch Tomahawk missiles. As I understand it, Tomahawks have become our new buzzword, it seems. Now we talk only about them.
Dasha, what does this indicate? It indicates that Trump has broken loose. Now he's going to blackmail Putin every single day. Remember, Solovyov was recently shouting about 2 Poseidons that would drown America with a nuclear wave. Just a few days ago, Solovyov was shouting about this. There's no need for a Solovyov in America. They have Trump. Now Trump has more different kinds of weapons than Russia does. Now Trump will tell absolutely everyone in the world every day about the best, most powerful weapon systems and how Russia will burn with the help of these weapon systems. Now imagine 50 days of this targeted informational bombardment of the Kremlin, the Medvedevs, and everyone else. There's a good chance that even before these 50 days are up, someone in the Kremlin will throw up their hands because they are unlikely to withstand such an information attack. It's true. They'll probably soil themselves first.
Sasha, to sum up, what do you think will happen in Europe? Right now, Germany is being called Ukraine's main ally because almost all supplies will go through Germany. This is very important. NATO Secretary General Mark Luther has also done a lot. Once again, Fico is in a panic, Orban and others too. Now even Malta is joining in general, Russian enclaves in Europe. What should we do, and will oil prices finally go down?
With these guys, Trump will deal with them if Putin really pushes him to the end. Because if anyone does, Trump has direct influence over both Orban and Fico. Moreover, if he turns a blind eye to certain things, the European Union will put the squeeze on them. When Germany stops, for example, supplying cars from Hungary, Orban will raise the white flag and say, I agree to everything. This has happened before. When he was blackmailed with cars, with automobiles, he immediately made all the necessary pro-Ukrainian decisions. Do you remember that situation when former German Chancellor Olaf Scholz told him to take a walk in the hallway while the vote was going on? He can be told to take a walk more than once, if necessary. A lot has changed in just the last few days. The board has been flipped over. We still don't fully understand that this is a new stage of the war. And this stage is clearly not in Vladimir Putin's favor. A lot has changed. The pace is just insane. It's a frightening pace. There was this kind of momentum at the beginning of the big war, at the start of the invasion. Probably in the first 6 months to a year. What we're seeing now is a new impulse. Everyone was hoping there would be some kind of reconciliation. There was hope. Trump probably had that hope too. Not so much hope as an illusion. He probably had that as well. Or thoughts that he could make a deal with Putin, that there would be a deal, and basically he could even profit from Russia. The deal is over. The illusions are over. And now there's a new impulse. Trump probably liked that. To go to war. Trump probably liked the image of a burning Moscow. I don't know how long that image will stay in his mind. Maybe until the trial, maybe 2 weeks, maybe 2 years. I don't know. But that he will take it out on Putin, that's 100%. What will happen in Russia now? Flames. What will happen in America now? or desire to start those flames. What will happen in Europe now? A desire to help start those flames. What will happen in Ukraine now? A new catastrophe, a new impulse, a new hope, after all, that Vladimir Putin's regime will collapse. And I am incredibly happy about this because I repeat every single time, freedom and hope. This is the last thing that Vladimir Putin can take away from us and will never take away from us.
A wonderful ending, dear audience. Sasha and I work for you in the format Dasha plus Sasha, Sasha plus Dasha twice a week. Write a few words in support of our tandem. Do I know what you write? There are a lot of different comments. I read and I give hearts, so thank you very much. Write the geography of views from where you watch us. Every Tuesday, Sunday, Wednesday, Monday, we are on my YouTube channel, Dasha Happy, on Dmitry Gordon's YouTube channel, and top analyst Alexander Demchenko. Sasha, thank you very much. And see you already this weekend.
Until next time.